be happy. I communicate.
As you might have already noticed, I'm absolutely obsessed with reverb. There is nothing I love more than showcasing to you the difference of my voice in the vocal booth compared to the hallway, and then again to the main studio, which is, by the way, slowly but steady evolving and getting closer to finish. So in a nutshell, without getting too complicated, reverb is, in like the smallest and purest form, just an echo, a bounce. But a bounce that happens so often, usually between walls. That's why we hear reverb the most in rooms. Our human hearing is very sensitive to it. Like, we can directly spot if a reverb is fake. I mean, every single time I'm watching a movie and the reverb isn't the right one, it just sounds so fake. I can spot it immediately. It throws me off. Probably not everyone, but I think most people will have a sense for it not being the actual real reverb recorded on site. When producing music, it's a tiny bit easier because you're not seeing the environment coupled with what you're hearing, so you can get away with using any kind of reverb. But there are some reverbs that sound really, really cheap, like a bathroom. And then there are really good reverbs that sound rich and very expensive. And I think it goes without saying, pick the better sounding one. Except if you want to have like something stylized and it should sound bad and artificial. And there are obviously different kinds of reverbs. The first most obvious is just recording whatever needs reverb in a room that has reverb. So if you want to have a vocal that sounds like it was recorded in a church, record it in a church. It's not really practical. I don't know a whole lot of people that still do it this way, but this was back in the days your only option. Then people started developing chamber reverbs. Old school studios still have rooms where you can lower the ceiling, alter the room dimensions, and then they had one mic in there that picked up what a speaker put into that room, which created a reverb that got picked up and then mixed again with the original signal, which is of course very expensive, very time consuming, and doesn't sound that good because it has to go out of a speaker and then again into a mic. It's like it was the only option. And nowadays you have all kinds of fancy reverbs, impulse response, where you have you just record how a reverb evolves in a room with like a clean signal that can then adapt to any kind of signal. So it's like recording in a church. Someone already did that with like a test signal, and now you can apply it to your signal. They sound pretty good, and I use them for all kinds of sounds. Usually when I need something that sounds weird or special, or like faking someone being in a place. But that's actually not what I use when I make music most of the time, and especially not for vocals. I mean, I'm already producing music for around 10 years, and I always go back to plate reverbs. I don't know why, they sound the richest. Those were actually the first fake reverbs ever. Very simple. You have plates, steel plates that are on like tension, and then you put a signal in between those plates. The plates start vibrating the reverb, where the sound goes back and forth, which creates an artificial reverb that I personally like the most. So in my opinion, the best reverb and the first reverb kind you should get, any producer should get, is definitely a good plate reverb.
I've been running away from my secrets.
I finally had time to work again on Watch Me Burn, and this vocal right here is perfect to show you an example of like how a reverb sounds, how to actually set it, what kind of controls are important. And I'm using here Perfect Plate XL. It's in the name already. It's like my very recent reverb purchase, so I'm using it at the moment quite a lot. And for example, you got right here medium, slow, and fast XL. Those are different kind of characteristics and algorithms: dark, natural, bright. You can then EQ the reverb, which is, I think, the most underrated when it comes to reverbs. You always need to EQ them because they might have some mud in the low frequencies. They might not have enough of the top frequencies. So definitely always separately EQ your reverb. And then definitely the most important, the mix knob. So let's maybe just play it a little.
Eyes, I'm gonna stand up. I'm gonna greet the flames and let it out.
I think you can perfectly hear that it's in the dark setting, which I actually like for this song because it has a dark vibe. But let's maybe switch it up to natural.
Eyes, I'm gonna stand up. I'm gonna greet the flames.
And also really important is then definitely not only the mix, how much reverb, and the tail or decay time tells you for how long the reverb is actually playing, like how big actually of a size is the room. So let's play it again and play around with it a little.
Eyes, I'm gonna stand up. I'm gonna greet the flames and let it out.
It's then just really long. Don't make it too long, because when it starts overlapping, as it is right now, it's way too long. Keep it short and tight, and then play around like between the mix, the decay. That's usually where you find like the sweet spot. For example, for snares, you want to make it long enough that it goes until the next kick, and right before the next kick kind of stop and suck towards the kick again. That's usually how I do it, at least for snares. Vocal depends on the mood. Right here, darker song, more clubby, more reverb, definitely an option. If it's more a brighter, poppier kind of song, you would actually go for drier vocals. Like not dry vocals, but definitely drier than this. Then we got our input output, high pass, low pass. Width, I think that's pretty clear. Width just makes the reverb wide. I prefer having it wide. This also helps you to separate it a little from the vocal and make the vocal wide without making the vocal actually wide. You just widen the reverb that is around it. Delay is usually the pre-delay. That means how long it takes that the reverb actually reacts to the original signal. So for example, when I clap, the sound has to travel to the walls and then the reverb is being kind of created. And that delay, you can set it. For example, if you want to have the attack dry and have snappier attacks, then have a little bit of delay. Like standard is 10 to maybe 30 milliseconds. If you want to have it like spot on, you just put it to 0 here on the vocals. Doesn't make a lot of sense for me. I usually do the delay more like for sounds that have more attack, like a pluggy synth or maybe drums, like stuff like that. And then right here we got some special features not a whole lot of other plugins have. For example, the drive, we can add tape saturation, warp, bite, all these kind of things that a lot of modern plugins have. Also rotate, a lot more in-depth settings where you can really tweak it. Detune, I personally wouldn't use it. You get then really a reverb that is more stylized and heavily affected. Maybe something if you make weirder music or want to have something that is kind of interesting and different than everything else. And the Ducker is something I actually like. It can help you to basically sidechain the reverb. That's also something I do a lot. Like my 2 reverb tips, number 1 and 2, first is EQing, the second would to at least consider sidechaining the reverb, at least for electronic dance music. And here it's basically just built in.
Eyes, I'm gonna stand up.
It's ducking.
I'm gonna greet the flame.
For example, one of the presets, you can go really wild with this. By the way, if you're interested, I'll link it down below. But like in general, those are like the main things you should focus on whenever setting a reverb. And yeah, I think just having a plate reverb might be enough to make any kind of music. It's like my one go-to island type of reverb thing I would take with me. The other ones, like, very specialized. If you're making film music or stuff like that, totally different story. But for music production, vocals, drums, and all that kind of stuff, I use something like this every single time.
Eyes, I'm gonna stand up. I'm gonna greet the flames and let it out.
That preset is actually interesting. Rotating psychedelia for brass sounds, actually. But again, it's a more clubby vibe kind of song. So maybe something like this, but of course a lot less, might actually end up in the final song. But for that, I of course first need to put a lot more hours into this track. So far, yeah, I just got the drums, the main synth, and the vocals. There's like a lot of automation missing, a lot of small details here and there, a lot of layers to just like get the song to a final stage. So just give me 1, 2, 3, 4 more weeks. I don't know. I'm taking like a slower approach to music production lately. I just take my time, work as much as necessary. I just do whatever I feel like without any pressure. And I hope this will result in better songs. Let's see how this goes.